please remind me. So it's lesson 2. So today is the second of our 5 classes together. Let's see, what have we got? About half classes here, but we're going to get started. So here's what we're going to do today. We're going to do a little poll and figure out what the e-commerce site that we're going to build during our class lessons is going to be. So we'll take some suggestions and put up a poll, and we'll have a vote, and that'll be our store. I do want to, then I'll do this next, then we'll introduce your semester-long project that you're going to be working on for assignment 1 that I'll be marking, as well as the 3 parts of class 2 that Eduardo would be marking. And I'm going to assign assignment 1A, which is your project plan. So we'll go over that in just a few minutes. Then we're going to set up our in-class project. We're going to create a controller today. And we're going to play around with building our own controller, working with methods, as well as mocking some data and passing some data back and forth from the controller to our view. So we're going to do all that today. So first order of business is figuring out what our in-class site is going to sell. So we're going to build an e-commerce site. Just show you an example of one from previous semester. But I like to have each class choose what they want to do. So let me just see if I've still got a running copy here. Oops. So I'm going to open a project. So one of my sections back in the fall, they suggested that we build a clothing store. So I can show you what the final project kind of looked like at the end of the semester, give you some idea of what we'll be doing together in class, just to make sure that I've got a database for this, which I might not. Okay, I'll try to start this, but I have a feeling I got rid of my database. We'll see. Cam, I did see your note. I'll have a look at it in a bit. So we built this little clothing store where we could shop. It's probably going to error out because I think I deleted my database on Azure. I'll have to recreate this locally another time. Got a little card icon. Yeah, I think it's going to error out. Okay. So, well, I guess I don't have that example to show. That's okay. So love to hear some suggestions. We're going to build an online shop together. We're going to start it over these weeks. Eduardo's going to pick it up. So you've got some suggestions. You can, yeah, my database is gone. Put in the chat, what kind of store would you like to build? I've had clothing store, I've had video game store, I've had a beer store. Put your suggestion in the chat of what kind of online store interests you, and then we can take a vote. Okay, thanks, Chris. A shop that sells whiskey. Okay, beer store. Anybody else have some ideas? I'll take these ideas and put them up in a quick poll in a minute. Music shop, cider store, computer store, automation store. All right. Well, a drugstore, a bookstore. Okay. Let me put a few of these options up in a poll. Okay, so we could have a liquor store. So that would encompass beer, whiskey. That'd be one option. We had books. We had drugs. We had cars. And yeah, maybe we'll do music. Oh, sorry, there were two more. I'll put them in here. We had automation and coffee store. And software I see as well. Okay, well we've got, I see software and computer. We could do that as well. Okay, lots of options. Somebody mentioned cannabis. That might go in part of our drugstore. Okay, so let me save and activate the poll. I'll share the link. Okay, so to vote in the poll, you just will go to, I'll put the link in the chat, but you can see it on my screen, pollev.com/richfreeman521. Whoops, and we'll save. Sorry, you may just have to refresh. Okay, so feel free to vote at pollev.com/richfreeman521. What kind of e-commerce shop do you want to build? Yeah, there are lots of good options. And we'll just build whatever is the most popular. So Cam, I will check that. I've never done that before. I've never added a student manually, so I will have to look and see if that's possible. But I'm not aware that's something that I could even do. So I will look into it when we take a break and see. But we may have to get some more info on that. Okay, so it looks like we've got a winner. So we'll kind of build our own version of the LCBO website. So we can use that as a model, maybe for some ideas. As to how we'll build the site. So we'll build an online liquor store. Okay, so thanks for voting. All right, so that's one item down. So next is I want to introduce assignment 1. So it's due in 2 parts. And I want to go over the assignment and even show you a sample project from a previous year. Now, the 2 parts are in the assignment section, but in order to see assignment 1A, you first must complete the academic integrity policy here, which only about less than half the class has done, even though I've been asking and asking, but you cannot submit the assignment. You won't even be able to even access this item until you go ahead and review the rules here around doing your own work in the course. And you either have to agree to these terms, or if you disagree, then you'll need to email me so we can have a conversation about what your concerns are about the rules around academic integrity. So until you've completed this item, you're not going to be able to see assignment 1A. Okay, so please make sure if you're one of the almost 60% of the people in the class who haven't completed that item, you need to complete it. here. So I'll go over assignment 1 that's in 2 parts, show you a sample of it, and answer any questions. Okay. So the assignment 1 is in 2 parts. Part A is worth 5%. It's due next week on Tuesday at 5 o'clock. It's not midnight. I know some of your instructors give you until midnight. For me, it's 5 o'clock next Tuesday. You have to submit part 1. Then you'll have 3 more weeks to submit part 2. Sorry, assignment 1, part B. And that's worth 15%. So the idea here is you're going to build a new .NET Core MVC web application with C#. You're going to integrate it with an SQL Server database to perform CRUD operations. What do we mean by CRUD? We're going to use that term a lot. Probably some of you used it in your other classes. What does it mean? Thank you, Adam. It stands for create, read, update, and delete. Thanks. Chris, Bugra, you guys got it. Okay. So for part A, you're going to basically, you have to do 2 things. The first thing you have to do for part A is submit a project idea on the class website. So there's 41 students in the class, I believe. I want 41 different projects. No 2 students can build the same thing. So what I've done is created a little website here. You click this link in the assignment. Some of you may have seen this site before. If you've had Jarrett or Tom before, they may have had you submit your project ideas here. So when you come here, you're going to click choose your section. There's only one section here. None of the other courses are here. So Summer 21, Comp2084 with me. First, you click View Projects, and you can see all the project ideas that your classmates have already submitted. You won't see who submitted what, and you'll see either an approved in false, in red, and I've said neither of these. I didn't approve either of these because both of these are online stores. You can't create an online store for your assignment. Why? Because we're building an online store together in class. So the projects are too similar. There's too much overlap there. And then you click submit a project idea. So you put in your email and give me a brief description, just a sentence. What is it that you want to build? Okay. So your project has to be different from other students. You have to do this before you submit assignment 1A. For assignment 1A, so first you're going to submit your idea here. You should probably do this today or tomorrow. And if you need help, if you say, I don't know what to build, I need some help, please email me and I'm happy to give you some suggestions of what you can build. So first you're going to submit your project idea on the website. Yes, Jess, you're right. I'm going to show you one. I'll show you a good example from last year from a previous student. Okay. Once I've approved, so as soon as you submit your idea on this website, the website sends me an email and I will come back and I will approve it or reject it. And if I reject it, I'll explain why. And then the site will email you back to let you know, yes, my project was approved, or no, I need to submit another one, another idea. Then you're going to submit this project plan document. So this file is here on Blackboard, assignment 1A project plan template. This is really an easy 5% for you. All you have to do here, here's the document. And again, it says submit. You have to submit your idea here first. It's got to be unique. It can't be an online store. So all you got to do here is put your name, a brief description of what your project is, explain why it's useful, and then you're going to add the link to your GitHub repository in the document. You also have to ensure that me and Eduardo both have access to your repository. So you go into the settings of the repository and manage access, and you add our GitHub usernames. So that way we have access to view your code. So all you have to upload on Blackboard next week is this document. That's all. So 5% for submitting your project idea, getting it approved, and then submitting this little project plan. 5 easy percent. So Jaskirat, you asked, what does a project look like? Great question. So here's a project a student did a couple years ago. So I've taken out his name. So this was like a little project management website. So I could go in and create a project. So do, let's say, August 1st, 2021. So I could create a project. I could then go in and edit it. Okay, I want to change the date to the 15th. And then I could also add tasks that are related to the project. So my task name is project specs, deadline, not complete, developer name is Rich, and it's tied to the project I created.
Excuse me, Rich.
Yep.
Sorry, where did you click to access this page? Sorry.
With the page I'm showing you?
Yeah, this project.
This is a student project from a previous semester.
Oh, okay.
So I'm showing you an example of one that student did in this class previously.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So then I can create. Okay. Well, I guess there's an error in the code. So the idea is that I can here he's got tasks. So I made this task this morning. Right, so I want to say, mark it as complete now. And save, and now it's marked as complete. So you need to have at least 2 tables, and they should be related in a parent-child relationship. Okay, so I can create, I can edit, and I can delete. Can it be a web app? Svatoslav, I'm not sure I understand. It has to be a web app. Everything in this class would be a web app. But can you clarify your question? Maybe I've misunderstood you.
Rich, another question. This project, it has to be like a online store, or it could be anything?
Okay. I will be clear. It actually cannot be an online store because we're going to be building a store together in class for our lessons. So if your assignment is a store, you're basically just going to be duplicating the work we're doing together in class. I want you to build something that is not a store for your project because we're going to build a store together each week on Wednesdays. So Svatoslav, did I answer your question or have I misunderstood you where you've asked, can it be a web app?
Oh, hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, I guess I understand, but I'm just curious if it should be like website or web application which work with database.
Yeah, it's going to be a web application with a database. It has to be a web app with
Okay,
database. But you're going to choose what the purpose of the web app is and what kind of data is in it. So the reason I want you to submit your idea here first is because I don't want, let's say your idea is, I want to create a grocery list. I don't want 2 students creating a grocery list web app. Whoever submits that idea first will have it approved. The other student will have to submit a different idea. Okay. So my suggestion is build a website that's about something that interests you or that you think would be useful. Does that help? Okay, great. So last year, like I had one student submit, she loves to garden, so she has plants in her garden. So she wanted to make a list of all the different kinds of plants that she had out in the garden. I had students who like to work out and go to the gym, so they wanted to track their workout and their exercise. I had a student who did, movie reviews. Student who did a book library. So whatever interests you. Okay, you're going to build your own, but you have to submit your idea here because that way I can guarantee that each student is giving me a unique project. And I don't have 10 students that are building a music library, for example. So for next week, first you'll use the project site to submit your idea. Once I approve it, you'll just fill out this Word document and submit it on Blackboard for 5 easy %. So by 5 o'clock next Tuesday. So that's part 1A. Part A is just your project plan and then setting up your GitHub repository and giving Eduardo and I access to it. Part B, which you have 3 weeks to do, which is lots of time, is you're going to write the code and build the project. You're going to push the code to your GitHub repository, and you're also going to publish your website to Microsoft Azure. So that's Microsoft's cloud hosting service. We'll do this together in class with our liquor store in the next, we won't do it this week, but probably in 2 weeks we'll do that. You must do all your own work on the assignment. It's not group work. You can't work with a classmate. You can't have a friend help you. You can't copy code you find on the internet. You have to do the work on your own entirely. Okay. If you give me work that is not entirely your own, I can't grade it. And the minimum penalty would be a grade of 0. I will check all your code very carefully. And if I have questions, I'll ask you to book an office hours meeting and ask you for a code review, where I could ask you to explain any work that's in your project. Anything that's in your project, you should be able to explain. If you can't, that suggests it's not your own work. You can use the online liquor store application that we're going to build. I'm going to post that code to GitHub every class. You can use it for reference, but you can't just copy it, change it around, and submit it back. It's for a guide only. Now, can you use any code that you find online? Yes, with these rules. You add a link, you add a comment where the code came from. It can't be more than 10% of your project. You should be able to explain it, and you have to ask, for the first part, you have to ask me for permission by email. So if there's fine code you want to use, send me a link to it. Say, here's the section I want to use. It's from this website. Is this okay? And I will say yes. But if you have code in your project that you didn't write, that you found online, and you haven't followed these rules, well, that's cheating, because then you're trying to take someone else's work and say it's yours. So in the assignment, we're basically building CRUD functionality. So you're going to create a new .NET Core MVC web application, and make sure you choose individual user accounts for authentication. You don't need that for assignment 1, but you will later on for assignment 2. So pick that option when you create the project. You're going to set up and connect to your SQL Server database. We're going to do that in lesson 4 in 2 weeks. You're going to generate model classes with corresponding database tables. Again, we'll do this in class in a couple weeks. And you will use Visual Studio to generate your controllers and views. So you're going to decide what you're building that is not an online store. Okay. You'll create the new project, including the HTTPS and individual user account options. Yeah, Artem, that's fine. Just include a link to it. So I'll just go back to the guidelines again. Yes, you can use W3 Schools. You can use external code. Bootstrap's already included in the project, so you don't even have to worry about that. So if you want to use something you found that I didn't teach in class, put a link to it. And before you use it, email me the link and say, hey, Rich, I found this on W3 Schools. I want to use it in my project. It's this section of code. That's perfectly fine. Okay, Artem? It's that you can't just take it from W3 Schools, put it in your project, and not have checked with me and not put a link to where the code came from. Because then you're suggesting that the code is yours, that you created it. Artem, does that clarify? Okay, great. So you'll have to create at least 2 models. You don't need more. Like, don't get carried away. You don't need to make 15 or 20 model classes in your project. 2 is typically sufficient. And there should be some kind of parent-child one-to-many relationship. So your tables need primary keys that are automatically assigned. We'll look at how to do this. And at least 3 other fields. And your child table should have a foreign key field. You've all passed your relational database class, so you know how to create primary and foreign keys. You'll build the models, and then we'll use some code in Visual Studio to generate our tables, which is awesome. We're then going to use MVC scaffolding to create our controllers and views. It will write all the code for doing create, read, update, and delete for us. You're going to add links into your navigation bar, like in this project. The home and privacy links Visual Studio creates, but this student added a projects link that shows a list of projects and a tasks link that shows a list of tasks. You'll add a descriptive name to the navigation bar and page title and include your student name and number in the footer, as well as the course name and code. So something like this, it'll have your name, your student number, our course name and course code. So you'll modify the footer for this. And you will need to make regular commits to GitHub. So to get full marks, you'll need a minimum of 4 commits over at least 2 days. So that means you're not just doing the whole project at the very end. You'll also create a Readme file that explains your application. So your Readme file might look something like this. Just show you a previous project. So there's another project from last year. This one. So this student, Maria, made like an image gallery. So here's her Readme file. She explains what the project is, how it works, the link to the live site, login credentials for part 2. And then you'll publish your site to Azure and include the link in your Readme file. So for part 2, for part B, you'll just submit the GitHub link and the Azure link. There's some bonus marks available if you like. You can redo your own CSS, or you can use an open source theme that you find online and you include the link. You can also do some independent learning to add some advanced MVC features that we haven't talked about in class. You would have to list these in your Readme file so that I know you've added them. So that's 2 possible bonus marks. So you get a couple marks for setting up your database with the keys and relationships, 8 marks for setting up your model classes, 8 marks for generating your controllers and views, 2 marks for customizing the layout, 2 marks for using GitHub properly, 2 marks for deploying to the Azure web server properly, and then up to 2 bonus marks. Okay, so part B is not due for 4 weeks. Part A is due next week. And then you'll want to do a good job on assignment 1 because assignment 2, it sits on top of assignment 1. Assignment 2 is not a separate project. You're working with the same project. So you need to do assignment 1 in order to be able to do assignment 2. Okay, so those are all the requirements for the project. Does anybody have any other questions about the requirements, what I'm asking you to build?
I just had a question. I don't really know if it's that relevant right now, but in regards to assignment 2, you said it's being built off of assignment 1, right?
Yes.
Okay, so let's say we get a lower mark on assignment 1 and there's some problems. Are we allowed to fix those problems? I mean, I know we won't be graded, like get better grade, but are we allowed to fix those problems before moving on to assignment 2?
Absolutely. I would encourage you to fix them, and you can come and get help if you don't know how to fix them. Yes, it won't be assignment 1, as you said, it won't be remarked, but you would want to fix those up so that you have a working project so that you could build on it for assignment 2. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Great question. Any other questions about what you need to do for assignment 1? Dan, you only need to reference it if you're actually using a block of code. Okay, so let's say, you find a method or a function you want to use that we didn't cover in class that you find in the Microsoft docs. You should just put the link to it and check with me first. Actually, I'll say this. If it's from Microsoft, you can absolutely use it. Yeah, any code you copy, you should reference, right? Because if you don't reference it, I'm assuming you just created it on your own. So the point of the reference is to acknowledge where the code came from.
And you want that referenced in line with where the code is put?
Yeah, that's the best thing. I mean, I'll do that in class as we're building our liquor store through the semester. Sometimes we're going to go and find some snippets of code in tutorials or from Microsoft or other things. So I'll always include a link to where that code comes from, which is also helpful if we ever want to reuse it, we know where to find it. It's 10%. Okay, it shouldn't be. External code shouldn't be more than 10% of your project. And this is because otherwise I've had instances in the past where a student found a tutorial with all the code and they said, oh, well, I just walked through the tutorial and did all the code. And I thought, yeah, but you didn't write any code yourself. You didn't even try. You just literally copied because the whole source code was provided. So that doesn't show me that you've actually I didn't know that the student actually knew anything or just copied and pasted. So yeah, you can use external code, but this needs to be at least 90% your own. I'm not interested in marking tutorials that students find on the internet. That doesn't really show me what students are learning. Other than that, you have good search engine skills. Okay, so again, please make sure you complete the academic integrity pledge under assignments. That will be necessary in order for you to unlock the assignment. And I see now there are only a few people who haven't done it, which is great. Okay, so I do also have office hours every Tuesday morning, so you can book with the link that's on Blackboard in faculty information. If you have questions or you need help on the assignments, part of the reason, so here's the booking link. I'm giving you a full month to complete assignment 1. It gives you time to book an appointment and get help if you're stuck. Or again, if you want to discuss ideas because you're stuck and you're not sure even how to get started, what's a good project idea to submit. Okay, great. So I'm already seeing a bunch of people submitting. Awesome. So make sure your idea is not in the list already when you go to submit. That's why I'm letting you see everybody's ideas. So I'll have a look at all these ideas and either approve or reject them after class today. Okay, so we've gone over the assignment. It's good. We figured out what we're building. So now we can set up our project. So I'm going to go to Visual Studio. I am going to make a new project. So make sure you open up Visual Studio. And we're going to click on Create a New Project. And we get kind of two panels here, two columns. The right side has all the different Visual Studio templates. Over on the left, it actually shows us the recently used templates. So we want to use the same template we used last week, which is this ASP.NET Core Web App Model View Controller. This first one, this would just be a plain website. It doesn't use MVC. So we want this. So choose this option, and same when you're creating the project for your assignment, you're going to choose the same options that we're going to choose today, which are the same options we chose last week. So it's an ASP.NET Core Web App Model View Controller using C#. There are options for other languages, so make sure you pick C#. And then click the Next button. Now we need a name for the project. We're building a liquor store. I'm going to call this, let's say I'm going to call it .NET Drinks with no spaces. We never want to have spaces in our project names. You don't have to call it .NET Drinks, but you can call it something else if you like. I'll leave these options, my location, creating a new solution. I'll leave this box unchecked. And I'll click Next. So my framework is targeted for the current version .NET 5, but we want to change one option here. Notice authentication defaults to none. So that means everything's going to be public. There's no registration, login, or any kind of authentication checking. We want to change that because we want to have two kinds of users in our store. We want to have our customers who can shop and make purchases and check out. And then we also want to have an administrator that can manage the products in the store. So I'm going to change the authentication type to individual accounts. And you'll want to do this in setting up your project for the assignment. Adding the user accounts in an existing project, it can be done, but it's a lot of work. It's much easier to check this, to set this up when we create the project. So make sure authentication type is set to individual users. There are other options. We can use Microsoft identity, like a Georgian login or Windows, but we just want username and password. We also want to make sure HTTPS is configured for SSL, which is something you'll talk about later in the semester with Eduardo. Okay, so .NET 5, individual accounts, configure for HTTPS, and then you can just click the Create button. I'll just leave my screen up for a second before I click Create, just so you can see all the options if you're a bit behind. And by all means, if you're stuck or you have a question, please use the chat. I do try to keep my eye on it as best I can. So I'll create my project, which will take a minute for Visual Studio to get going. So it's adding some dependencies. And it looks exactly like our project did last week. We've got a controllers, models and views. We've got our www root with our CSS, JavaScript, Bootstrap jQuery libraries already pre-packaged up. And does anybody remember, how do we launch the site? How do we get our local web server to run? That's built right into Visual Studio. Yep, we could hit F5. Now, there's two options. There's start debugging and start without debugging. Both will launch IIS tools. I actually prefer to start without debugging. You can start the debugger. I only do this when I want to put breakpoints in my code, because when the debugger is running, we can't make changes to the code. You have to stop the debugger, make changes, and restart it. If you choose start without debugging, which is Control and F5, it launches the site, but it doesn't lock our code window. So I actually use start without debugging most of the time. You can also press this play button here, but again, that starts the debugger. So I like start without debugging. I find it's just more efficient. I'll only use the debugger when something goes wrong and we want to step through our code at runtime line by line. So we get the template project here. And it looks just like last week, right? We've got two links. We've got home and privacy. And we've also got register and login pages. Again, you're going to be using these for assignment 2. That's assignment 2A, is setting up authentication. So we can use these pages. You'll also add social sign-in for assignment 2. So that's why we check, when we check that individual user account option, we get these links and we get these pages. If we left authentication as none, these links, these pages wouldn't be here. So remember the pattern. Notice, so we've got these two links here. So when I click privacy, notice the URL. It's /home/privacy. So how does this link work? Right? Remember, the first part of our URL is the controller that's handling the request. So when we see home at the end of our, after our root domain, that means we've got, in the controllers, we've got a file called home controller. And then inside of here, we've got a method called privacy. Now, interesting though, notice when I click the home link, it takes me back to the home page, but notice, how come it doesn't have any controller name or method name here? Why do you suppose that is? Yeah, Connor, right, it's the default. So we can actually see this in Visual Studio. If I open up this startup.cs file, there's some options here around connecting to the database. We'll use those in a few weeks. This is where we've got HTTPS enabled because we checked that box in setting up the project. And down here, we've got app.use endpoints, and it sets out some defaults. So notice our default endpoint, our default controller is home, and the default action is index. So if we don't specify any controller or any method, it automatically calls the index method of the home controller. So this method gets called. So if we just go to /home, and also notice on Windows, your URLs aren't case sensitive like they are on an Apache server running on Linux. I can type home all in lowercase, it still works. So I don't have to put in the method name. If I do, so these three URLs are all equivalent because we've set up this pattern. Boogra, good question. No, we can only have one default because if we have multiple, it won't know what to do. So we can change this. If we don't want a home controller, we could change this to something else. Or if we don't want a method called index, we could change it to something else. But this is the default. So we'll typically leave it like this. Okay. Good question. So that also means if we build a new controller, let's say, so later on in the term, we're going to have an orders controller. So it'll be something like this, just putting the link in the chat. Actually, I'll just put it here. So once we build an orders controller, we can call the index method just with this URL. We wouldn't have to necessarily add the /index at the end. So if no method is specified, it will always look for an action or method in a controller called index by default. So this URL /orders/index and this URL just /orders, they're equivalent because in the index method will always be the default. So that's something important to note about how the URL patterns work in .NET MVC. So let's create a new controller of our own. We won't use this after this week. I don't think it's kind of a throwaway file. But last week, we were working in the home controller. So Visual Studio automatically gives us an index method. It automatically gives us privacy. And last week, we created an about method and an about view. And then we added the link in our nav bar. Instead of repeating that, we want to make a new controller entirely. So let's go over here to Solution Explorer. And let's make so right click the controllers folder and click add. And then we want to choose controller. So we're going to use Visual Studio to generate a new controller for us. And it's going to do some of the work. So let's call this. So we get three options here. We can have an empty controller, which is what we'll use. We could have a controller with read, write, and list actions, or what you'll use in your assignment, and we'll start using in lesson 4, is an MVC controller with views using Entity Framework. It creates views to create, read, update, and delete, and list entries from a data context. So we'll work with our database in a couple of weeks. For today, we're just going to work with an empty controller. And we have to give it a name. And notice it already includes the word controller in the name, and that's by convention. I'm going to call this, we'll call it brands controller. So we want to, in this controller, we want to display some of the brand names that are in our store. You can give it the .cs extension or you can leave it out. And you'll notice here it says it requires the suffix of controller. So this word controller is mandatory. So call it brands controller. And typically the controller names are plural. So make sure there's an S in there. So I'll put the name in the chat. I'm going to call it brands controller. Click add. And notice right away, it creates a class in the controller's namespace, and it gives us an index method that returns a view. So let's go and try this out now. Let's see what happens if we try and call this method in our browser. We're almost due for a break. So just shrink this down so we can see our code. So I'm just going to change the URL here and go to my local host / brands. Okay, so what happened? Why did this error out? Close, Jason. We have the root, right? This URL did get mapped to this method. So it's not quite the root that's missing, but you're close. Right, Eric, you got it. It's looking for a view called index. Yep, seeing lots of good answers in the chat. There's no view. So it's looking for a view in views, brands, index, or views shared index or pages shared index. That view doesn't exist. So we'll just quickly create this view, and then our error should go away. So there's two ways we can do it. I could go down to views. I'm going to try a quick way to do it. If I right-click index, I'm going to right-click my method name and see if this will work. I'm going to choose add view. I'm not sure it's going to put it in the right place, but I'm going to try. I'm going to pick an empty view. And it's going to be called index. So notice it automatically copies the method name to my view. And notice what it did. Visual Studio nicely created the subfolder under views. It created the brands folder for me because this didn't exist. So again, I'll show you again how I did that. I right-clicked my method name. I just chose add view. I picked empty. And then I just let the view be called index. I'll just cancel out. So if I refresh now, there's no code on the page, but maybe I can just put on something here. Our brands. So I just put on a simple heading tag, and now if I refresh, this error should go away. Your project is not allowing you to add a controller. What happens, Jaskirat? And now it loads our new view. So we've created a controller and a view without really writing any code at all. We let Visual Studio do it, and it automatically can map this URL to load our view now. Okay. So the option of adding controller is disabled, probably because, see, if you start debugging, this is why. When the debugger is active, you cannot modify the project. So I'm going to start my debugger. It's in debug mode, but it's disabled. So in order to add, you have to stop the debugger. So you have to press the red So this is the problem with using the start debugging option. You have to press stop before you can change your project. If you choose start without debugging, this runs the web server but doesn't lock the code. So this is why I'm suggesting you use start without debugging, not start debugging when you run the project. It is 5 to 12 by my clock. So let's take a break. Let's take 10 minutes, get out of your chairs, stretch your legs, and we will come back at 12:06.